Hello and welcome to the One Life Church devotional series where we cover the entire Bible in 20 months. Well, today's chapters are 1 Kings 10 and 11, the end of the life and the rule of King Solomon. So chapter 10, we see Solomon at the zenith of his glory and his prowess. He is so wise. The Queen of Sheba arrives to have a look and to ask him questions of her own testament to see really is his reality what his reputation suggests. And she sees that in terms of military wisdom, administrative wisdom, governmental wisdom, trading, economy, creativity, there was nothing in the universe that could match him. It says that silver wasn't even a commodity in those days. He just built with gold because he had so much of it. I mean, this is Solomon at the zenith of his power. He builds a throne for himself with 12 lions coming up the 6 steps towards him. I mean, it paints a picture of him at the peak of his prowess. But then chapter 11 shows us his demise. God said to him, don't marry women of other nations because they will bring their gods into your home and they will dilute your faith. But it says that he loved these foreign women and he was setting up peace treaties with these countries. So he married 700 women. I mean, how does a bloke even do that? And 300 concubines. He had 1,000 women. Imagine the breakfast table. Imagine how that house had to be administered. Imagine the complexities. And this is what it says, is that he seemed to hold himself together right until his old age. And then verse 4 says, as he got old, the wives turned his heart away from the Lord, and he was no longer fully devoted to God. Eventually they wore him down. And this is what he did. They must have been nagging him, saying, we want to serve our God. So he relented. And he built altars to Asrith, to Molech, to Chemosh, to all these foreign gods. And they were despicable gods. Some of them had despicable sexual practices in their worship. Others, sacrificed their children in their worship. Babies were on the altars. And it says this in verse 8, he did the same for all his foreign wives. So he brought into his home these other religions. We call that syncretism. Putting other religions, other philosophies, other values, other gods alongside your God. And so that's what happened to Solomon. And so his heart then started to drift. I asked the question, what are you allowing into your life? What are you allowing into your heart? The Bible talks of us being like the temple of the Holy Spirit. So in other words, when we become believers, he comes upon us, he comes in us. And what are we allowing in that'll dilute our faith? Here I'm in my Cape Town apartment. Here's a massive front door. Outside of this front door is a gate. Outside that gate is a security gate and another one. So if you have to come to visit me here, let me shut this big front door. You have got to get through a couple of security gates, some cameras through that door. And if I let you in, you are going to change what goes on in my home. And I suppose that's, what are you letting into your life that could dilute your faith? That's the question I think of when I read this chapter. And then God says this to Solomon. You didn't listen. Your heart is not devoted to me. Look at Israel. You've got altars everywhere, serving other gods everywhere. Somebody asked me this question at a Connect group last night. They said, if a Christian allows sin into their life and doesn't deal with it, are they still a Christian? Now, the biblical answer to that is yes. When God looks at you, he looks at you as a believer in Jesus, as the righteousness of Christ. He sees Christ's righteousness. But that's not his intent for you. His intent for you isn't that your house becomes contaminated, that you lose your inheritance. You see, this is what God says over Solomon. He says, I'm going to raise up 3 men. So he does. A guy who lived in Egypt, a guy who lived in Damascus, and Jeroboam. And he says, your inheritance is going to be removed from you. He says, I'm not going to do it in your lifetime because I made a covenant with your father David. And so your kingdom is secure now, but your children, they're going to be in trouble. And the inheritance is eventually going to be taken from you. And so the Bible speaks about us having an eternal reward. If we coexist with sin and we allow syncretism in and our hearts are not fully devoted for God, it's not that we're not going to heaven, but it's that we lose our reward, we lose our inheritance. This warning of Solomon, blessed by God, allowing things into his heart that stray him from the Lord, is a sober warning to us. Not that we fear that God no longer loves us, but that we fear that we lose the great plans that God has for our lives. God bless you.